Alright, thank you for joining me and thank you so much for being here. With another Superman having just come out, I thought this was the perfect time to fly back through every live-action Superman movie and serial. Especially the weird ones you probably haven't seen.
How'd you find us? My freaky X-ray vision.
If you are looking for something a little more focused on the most recent movie, I did put out a spoiler-filled review of that last week. From capes and confidence to camp and confusion, these films chart the highs, the lows, and the truly bizarre side routes of the Man of Steel's big screen journey. So buckle up, Buttercup, because whether we are wearing underwear or not, we are looking at Superman through the ages. And as we go through each of these, we're also going to be throwing them onto a tier list because this is the internet and the internet loves its tier lists. For our purposes, the tiers we will have are Truth, Justice, and the Absolute Best, the Fortress of Solid Tier, the Metropolis Standard, From Another Planet, and My Kryptonite, which kind of just means that these movies aren't super duper for me, less so that I think they're terrible. Because I think something that's terrible to me is going to be great to somebody else, and I think that's really fucking valid. We are starting with 1948's Superman. Is there any way to watch this today without feeling a crazy juxtaposition between reality and being able to walk into a major news organization and just demanding a job with zero experience? The first live-action adaptation of The Man of Steel really takes its time with introductions, giving us essentially a full episode's runtime with Jor-El on Krypton and the Kents in Kansas, then jumps right into superheroics, basically doing a lot of cat and mouse chasing of the villain's goons, and speaking of which, we are given, I think, an entirely original villain in the Spider Lady who does a great job of kidnapping the same three people from the Daily Planet. And one of them is Superman. Plot-wise, it is nothing special. The Spider Lady wants the MacGuffin, Superman is in the way, Lois Lane is here, but it doesn't seem like the serial is so much as interested in developing a romance between Superman and Lois, as it was interested in having Clark just be a cheeky fuck and ruin her career to the best of his abilities by stealing her stories. It is a narrative that does meander a lot while it spins its gears figuring out how to kidnap Jimmy next. To make Man of Steel fly in these serials, the studio enlisted Fletcher Studios to just hand-draw Superman flying behind an object and having Kirk Alyn pop out immediately after. It is an effect that works better than it should the first two times they use it, and then it gradually loses its charm. I really wish this production had saved its use a little later into the story to really maximize that effect. This really ends up having the structure of a Superman story with so much iconography we recognize today noticeably tweaked. The Kents finding a crashed ship in anything other than a rusty pickup feels wrong for some reason to me. The story, again, also clearly doesn't know what to do with itself because we spend half of the story sitting at the Daily Planet waiting for Perry White to tell us what to do. And yeah, for that one, we're going to put that in From Another Planet. It's not a bad serial, it's just really weird and it's not all there. Next is 1950's Atom Man vs. Superman. From the get-go, Atom Man vs. Superman has so much more personality than the serial that came before. In concept, Lex Luthor's shticks as the Atom Man could be pretty interchangeable. The Spider-Woman could just as easily have ran this scheme since we never actually see the villains doing a science, they just developed a super weapon off-screen. Oh, yeah, and the Atom Man is Luthor. That isn't much of a secret, and I really do like how the narrative plays with that irony. It makes it more about how Superman is going to figure out or how Luthor is going to get away instead of leaning into the mystery that any audience member would have guessed by the second serial. Not only does Lex Luthor bring so much to the story, but every character has a pretty big revamp despite the casting return. Either the actors are that much more comfortable in their roles, or the additional writers in this story really pumped up the dialogue. Lois Lane especially shines in this narrative, where last time it felt like her being the damsel was more accidental or happenstance just because we needed someone to be saved. Here she is way more active in the plot, going so far as to cover for Clark Kent. Jimmy instead makes himself the damsel, which for some reason I'm way more okay with. For reasons beyond my logical understanding, and I get in universe it's because of money and convenience, we are still planning and making major arrests from the office of the Daily Planet itself instead of taking the bad guys to any police station or government building. Which feels really weird. Why are we just dropping criminals off in the office of an old newspaper editor? This serial also uses the same techniques to make the Man of Steel fly, and it just does not do the trick anymore. In fact, they doubled down on the animation, having more than a few instances where live-action actors awkwardly transition into animation directly. I love the effort, I hate the execution. All in all, Adam Man vs. Superman feels way more like a Superman story from a character perspective. While the story is still a little cookie cutter and you definitely won't believe a man can fly after watching this, what ultimately came to screen is earnest and a lot of campy fun. This is definitely going in the Metropolis standard. This is the very minimum of what I expect out of a Superman movie. Then we have 1951's Superman and the Mole Men. In essence, we took what could have made for a single episode of the 1950s Superman TV series and stretched it into a feature-length, in big quotes, anti-lynching and hate mob PSA. It doesn't come together really, but I am definitely here for what it has to say. The plot is Clark and Lois just happen to be in a podunk town for a story about an oil drill that up and discovered some mole men. We spend an uncomfortable amount of time watching one of the mole men get chased and lynched for all intents and purposes, but that starts to feel like the point after a while. And please note that the title of this movie is not Superman vs. the Mole Men, V the Mole Men, or isn't even X the Mole Men. Lois in this movie is very superfluous, only really being there to side with the bad guys once or twice and flip back and forth while Clark gets to be the sole moral compass for this adventure. She's even the one calling them mole men, saying that they have the bodies of moles and the heads of weird guys, even though I'm pretty sure it's just short people or kids in gorilla suits. They do nothing to indicate anything mole-like other than living underground, to a point where I wish this movie was called something entirely different. And yeah, I feel like this also should go to the Metropolis standard. I feel like it's on par with what we just had. Then we have 1975's It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman.
Come on, pal, let's go, Bam. I need a little exercise. Take that.
Now, this movie technically shouldn't be on this list. It wasn't theatrically released. I think it was just released for a TV station. But this is one of the most beautifully insane things I've ever had the pleasure of watching. And at the moment, it's available in its entirety on the YouTubes, and it is a goldmine of memeable songs, moments, and characters. It's Superman the Musical. I don't know how else I can sell it. If that sounds fun to you, then you're going to have fun with this. It's definitely going in the Kryptonite tier, but I also... it's like a kind of kryptonite that I want to eat anyway. Like, it's not good for me, but I want it. This is great. I love it. Finally, we are at something I am sure everybody will recognize more. 1978's Superman. When something manages to be exactly what you expect, yet is pretty flawless across the board and doing exactly what it is trying to do, this is one of those movies that I had access to all my life, yet somehow never actually put on until now. It's a personal favorite of my younger brother, even. Something about this movie being so familiar with that first act and concept turning off to this particular adaptation due to no fault of its own. The first 40 minutes were largely what one thinks when it comes to the prototypical Superman origin story, which is exactly what I was worried about, my overfamiliarity with the character making an early adaptation suffer. But as soon as we got to Metropolis and the final two acts involve actual Supermaning and the villainy of Lex Luthor, there is a lot more to engage with me anyway, personally. And the two people you would expect to steal the show do just that. Christopher Reeve does a great job embodying both a meager Clark Kent as well as his alter ego. Gene Hackman alternatively plays off Reeve's nuance by chewing the gristle off every scene he is in. While there not being any punchy threat for Superman to go up against might be a little disappointing, here it feels more like we are understanding the limitations of the medium at the time. Using Kryptonite means we still have an active threat to our hero, but the entire story gets to focus on more of the character's humanity, which ultimately saves the day in the most New Jersey way possible. 1980's Superman 2. Superman 2 does not let the audience forget what came before, does it? Recapping everything that happened in the first Superman movie in the opening sequence before really hyper-focusing on the relationship between Superman and Lois Lane, while Zod and his pair of cronies absolutely terrorized the planet on the day Superman opted to take a break, it would appear. Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder were the crux of this story for me, making the audience believe in their relationship, and wanting these people to succeed are what drive the tension while the bad guys are going about harassing the greater United States, which has authority over the world in the story, it would appear. There are many great themes centering around the essence of humanity and generally doing the right thing. Two themes that Superman kind of lives off of, but done especially well in this specific production. We also get actual factual bad guys that the Man of Steel can, in theory, throw down with. Although this mostly amounts to grappling and throwing a person on wires through a cardboard wall. Like its predecessor, Superman 2 reaches well beyond its means as far as what it can believably accomplish, but it comes together in a far more engaging and entertaining package than what came before. Now I just have to get my hands on the Richard Donner cut. This is definitely our first movie that is in truth, justice, and the absolute best. Did I forget to put Superman in a tier? Shit. Fortress a solid tier. Yeah. Definitely Fortress of Solitude for the first Superman movie, and then Truth, Justice, and the absolute best for Superman 2. And then Superman 3 from 1983. I was expecting to be far more disappointed in this than I ultimately was, and by a large amount. Splitting its time between Clark Kent and subsequently Superman hanging out in his hometown of Smallville, and Richard Pryor doofing his way to the top of criminal schemes by clacking at a computer board every couple of minutes. Christopher Reeve is not unbelievable when he is forced to pull a third role out of his super rare to play an emo Clark Kent. It is one of the more fun sequences along with the techno-horror finale, outside of leaning into slapstick and humor a touch more than the prior two installments in the series, which makes sense when you hire Richard Pryor for any part of a movie. Neither the writing nor the overall production quality feels significantly lesser than either Superman or Superman 2 to me. The third installment of this franchise doesn't necessarily take Superman to any new places metaphorically, or literally thinking back. It might not be a home run for those in favor of, a sports metaphor, but it is a solid base hit and deserves a cheer from the crowd in its own right, I think. That is again going to go to... I think that's going to go to Metropolis Standard. That feels like a good tier for that. Then we have Superman 4, The Quest for Peace from 1987. I feel like I am definitely in the minority of not entirely hating this movie. Bringing back Gene Hackman and Margot Kidder do a lot to carry a slightly underdeveloped script. The story splits itself between a comedically dastardly Lex Luthor using nonsense science to clone an evil Superman, while workers at the Daily Planet effectively fight a hostile takeover from sensationalism over proper news reporting. There is an odd melancholy to this whole movie, opening with Clark Kent talking about selling the family farm sets the mood, a mood that doesn't really lighten much throughout, almost like we are trying to course correct from the comedy audiences didn't love in Superman 3. All of the comedy here being either unintentional from the doof of a clone, or half-written slapstick with Lex's new hench. The B-plot with the Daily Planet is both weirdly relevant and the source of the most competent storytelling on screen here. Essentially letting Margot Kidder work her own angle in a fun little adventure. That and having there be an actual moral dilemma as well as consequences for Superman unilaterally making a global decision make for interesting character work. Altogether though, especially when it comes to most of the Superman-y elements for this installment, it feels like they have Kryptonite tucked in their back pocket. From the nonsense science that creates a clone Superman to the effects that lack the impact that Superman 1 or 2 had on the audience, just about everything probably could have used another pass. What it does still kept me around and engaged enough on an early Wednesday morning. And yeah, I'm gonna put that also in Metropolis Standard. I don't hate it. It's okay. And then we have Superman Returns from 2006, the first Superman movie I ever saw in theaters. And Superman does in fact return, by the way. In this kind of sequel, more of a revival that could take place in the same realm of Christopher Reeve's Superman movies, returning with the titular Man of Superiority comes his supporting cast, mainly Lois Lane, who comes with a fresh new cuck of a husband, as well as Lex Luthor, who is specifically here to cause a bad time. Oh, and I guess between wiping her memory at some point, Clark Kent also knocked Lois up before he ran to do something really nondescript in space. This picture does have all the polish you would expect from an early 2000s blockbuster. Whatever sepia filter used to make everything feel old-timey is effective, but does make everything feel a little flat at the same time, I thought. It is a styling choice that I do not entirely love and I think hurt the overall picture, but at least I understand what is going on there. I remember watching this in theaters and Also now feeling entirely underwhelmed by Superman Returns from beginning to end. A lot of the cast is great and was largely done dirty by the abuser of a director and a script that lacked both the fun and heart of the previous Superman movies to me. Yeah, this is gonna be from another planet. I would put this movie on. I would put most other Superman movies on over Superman Returns, honestly. And then we have Man of Steel from 2013. The build up to Man of Steel and the gravitas given to the entire production by Warner Brothers is crazy. It feels like this was the few times that the studio gave one of these DC productions to a director and actually let them do what they wanted. At least that means this movie doesn't feel quite like the disjointed mess. But we aren't here to talk about Man of Steel's universe, just Man of Steel itself. Oh, and Batman v Superman, I suppose, but that's next. I don't entirely know how to lay this narrative out except to say that it is a very straightforward superhero origin story. It's told a little out of sequence in a way that doesn't really affect the plot, but does help this stand out against the many Superman origin stories we have seen on the big and small screens throughout the years. And after having watched through everyone I can get my hands on, the flashbacks definitely help with the pacing, giving us moments for Superman to actually save people in a few less intense but still actiony moments before he gets a chance to really throw down like he has rarely gotten a chance to before. But that being said, this does feel obscenely cynical and utterly dejected with the world, from its color palette to its characters. We are lucky this Clark didn't grow up to become Brightburn with how bitter Kevin Costner's Pa Kent is. This is a Superman that is heroic in spite of his upbringing, which also changes the message in a way that I don't entirely mind, but does make me want to punch this character in the face for making his son feel so different all the time. On the opposite end, I never really minded the neck snap. It felt like a very fitting way for this Superman, who has never dealt with a threat like this, to end this fight. Moreover, the character actually shows grief and horror in what he has done. Even if there ultimately aren't any for this specific action, Cavill's performance sells that there are moral consequences, and that is important to me at the very least. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice from 2016. Oh, look, it's Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, and he's dead. Okay, this might be the dawn of justice, but it is sure devoid of any hope. You know, that thing that the symbol on Superman's chest is supposed to stand for? Conceptually, I feel like I absolutely get what this movie is going for, but at every point the themes really fall flat for me. As much as Zack wants Martha to be his Rosebud, it is a moment that has never landed for me, and is kind of indicative of a lot of the narrative issues I have with Batman v Superman. When the entire crux of the title conflicts can be solved with a halfway sensible conversation, and both characters are being extremely vague or belligerent outside of the characters we have already been presented, I am immediately drawn out of the story. Clark Kent is a reporter, and the only thing he can think to say to a Batman threatening him is, "You have to listen to me." Followed by a display of force, which is always a great conversation starter. And I am sorry, but no one talks about how lackluster the title bout actually is. We have seen this exact fight a dozen times over in animation and on page, so why does this feel so slow? Even compared to the other fights in this movie, the pacing in arguably the most important fight in the movie is shit, which is really weird for a Zack Snyder fight. For everything I enjoy about Batman v Superman, it does something equally distracting or even more so in a lot of moments. I love how visceral Batman's fights against anyone not powered are. I hate how little fucks he gives about using guns throughout the movie, though. I love the inner conflict Superman has about being able to save everybody, except he might have noticed the dude in the wheelchair who hates him has a very conspicuous lead box welded to his seat. Batman v Superman is my kryptonite, man. I don't love that movie. And I think I forgot Man of Steel. Man of Steel, I love Man of Steel. Man of Steel goes up at truth, justice, and the absolute best. Sorry I forgot that one. And did I forget Superman Returns? Superman Returns goes to From Another Planet. Blech. And I know people are probably going to be asking why I'm not covering the rest of the live-action Justice League movies, or Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. I would rather cover those in a dedicated Justice League video, because they don't feel like they're about Superman, and that's kind of what I want to focus on. So yeah, then we are left with Superman from 2025. Yeah, that's some good shit right there. It has so much variety and earnest fun without being overly quippy to me. A little dialogue, especially early in, is a little expository, and we are reminded that Superman is solar powered like thrice over. Big changes come in Kryptonian lore that might not hit right with everybody, especially those who like their Superman lore pure. That didn't take away anything for me. If anything, it further spotlighted Superman's humanity, but does open up a lot of questions about Supergirl and her upcoming movie. Narratively, we are presented with a great mystery, not in who the villain is, but in what exactly he is trying to do. We open in a world in progress, letting the audience uncover how society functions when metahumans have been around longer than the Mayflower. Superman is already established and starting on the back foot. It instantly sets the stakes high as they have ever been. He is given additional motivations that make sense, so he is pulled as a character in many directions as Lex Luthor's personality is dissected in that final act. The biggest complaints I'm seeing about this movie are it feeling like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie and Superman feeling weak, either in tone or in the characters, and it's not a complaint I really see. It's lighter in tone than Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's Justice League, but like, Man of Steel is only slightly more hopeful than 100 Days in Solo, so like, inserting a single joke is going to make this way lighter than that movie. The only scene that did feel very Peter Quilly is like Mr. Terrific's incredible action sequence, and I was also okay with that, and there was a cat. The cat that just threw up on the bed. I have to go clean that up. So really quickly, I'm going to put this in truth, justice, and the absolute best. And that is our cinematic journey through Krypton, Kansas, and every adaptation of Metropolis in between. Thank you again so much for watching, and if you had fun with this, I am sure you know how YouTube works to keep me in your feed. There's plenty more coming in the world of comics, heroes, and the stories that make them so iconic when we spend next month entirely focused on Phase 2 of Marvel's Cinematic Universe. And hey, if I missed your favorite obscure Superman moment, or if you somehow love Nuclear Man, let me know down below. Until next time, keep your head high, keep your glasses on, and never forget that truth and justice go out of style.